them talking a little bit about there's this culture there that maybe the white privileged folks might not be aware of or familiar with. So how can you help me understand that a little better, if you could?
You know, Jonathan, that connects with your PowerPoint piece very nicely. Let's show that, and then we'll both talk from it.
Okay, Tim, can you share that PowerPoint? Thank you.
Cindy, you want me to just share the first couple slides about the demographics of the classroom, the teachers, or do you want me to go into the leadership stuff also?
Why don't you do just the first part?
Okay.
Okay. And Karen, really excellent question.
Yeah. So while we're getting that going, Cindy asked me to take a look at two things and give some thought before this meeting. This question, children, or this comment, children need teachers who look like them. And you know, I think we have to really take a look at both not only our student population, but certainly our faculty and staff. Does it represent the demographics, the students of color in the school? Are they seeing people that they can relate to? But given the world that we want, if we would go to the next slide, Tim, I'm wondering if the opposite is also true. Children need teachers who don't look like them, because these children will be entering a world that is increasingly a world of color and diversity. And so we want children to be able to relate to people of their culture and color, but we also want them to be prepared for a very diverse environment when they become adults in the world. I think that was those first two slides, Cindy.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan.
You're welcome.
Tim, you can unshare. And so I would say, to answer your question in part, Karen, is that I think we don't do anything differently because the children are white in the classroom, or because there's one Black child. We don't need to teach differently. We need to teach the diversity that people have been missing for so many hundreds of years. We need to teach that regardless of the demographics of the classroom. We need to have a sensitivity and present information depending on the children who are there. But we need to flood the classrooms with what has been the greatest secret. And especially, even if there's not a child of color in the classroom, do we want them to be equipped with the lens of diversity and acceptance and honor? And they won't get that unless we give that to them fully, as if there were many children of color in the classroom.
And Cindy, something that you have continually brought up in some of our discussions, the other part of this is, do white teachers have different expectations of children of color? Do they assess on a different wavelength or a different mindset than the white children, behaviorally or academically, in terms of potential or needs and tendencies?
And the research says, on the whole, yes. And on the whole, it's a part of our humanity to judge, and our humanity to have a lens based on our own ideologies. And that as teachers, we have to walk into the classroom knowing that. And as heads of schools, we need to prepare our staff to first look at themselves, look at their biases and ideologies, look at where things came from. I had a conversation with my minister yesterday who said, I've really been thinking about some of the things that you have been saying, and I realized that when I grew up, my family used to, as a way of having some pastime on the weekends, my father would say, would you like to go down in town? And that they would get in the car and they would drive down to where there were predominantly African-American people and make fun of them. And that was a part of what they did. And it wasn't something that he even realized was something that was wrong. It's what his family did. And he said, I'm sharing that information, and I'm just now realizing some of the things that I have been carrying with me, and there are many, and this is just one. And so we have to recognize that there are things that are so deep-seated that we have in our past, in the past that may exist in our family before us, and that we don't even quite know the story, but we carry the feeling based on that, and that with that lens, we often judge students unknowingly.
Thank you, Cindy. We have a, I'm going to go to Malkia next, but there's a question that was in here about that first video. And the question is, why didn't she get the cupcake?
And don't we all wonder that? Don't we all wonder that? Why didn't she get the cupcake? Why was she sitting at the table alone and without the cupcake? Maybe if you could have said maybe she has an allergy to cupcakes, where's the other snack? But there wasn't one. Why was she sitting at the table by herself? What was the reason for that? There's just a lot in there that you cannot explain away by saying we just let all the children come and sit. And we don't look at whether they're black or white or whether they're short or tall or what kind of shirt they have on. We have to have a more empathetic lens. We just do.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Malkia, can you unmute? You are next.
Hi, everyone. This is my first time. I was not here last week, so I got a chance to be here. I'm only commenting on the video. I just want to say I work at Oneness Family School, and one of the things that we focus on is meditation. And here's why I'm bringing it up. When I saw the going back and forth between the two, the biggest thing that came to me in those arguments, each one of them were saying, hey, none of them were saying, I can feel you. I can feel you feeling me, which I think is vital in developing any kind of relationship. We all know that our amygdala is our first, processing, how we process information around the world. If you can't feel someone feeling you, then how are we going to be aware of all the other things? All the other things that make us diverse and beautiful and all that. But if I can't feel you feeling me, then there's no acknowledgement of my existence.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. 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 And couldn't you feel that child just watching her face? I mean, how could you not?
Yeah, beautifully said, Malkia. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Kitty is next. Kitty Bravo, if you can unmute.
Yeah. Well, I've been thinking a lot about how important it is to help every child, every person in your Montessori classroom and community feel like they belong. And so in watching that video, what came to mind is that child certainly didn't feel like she belonged, and that if we're consciously trying to make sure everybody belongs, then no matter who was sitting at a table alone, we'd have children move over and make sure that no one is sitting alone. But in particularly having that awareness that someone who's different, for whatever reason, than the majority of the children in the classroom certainly need to not ever feel like they're being isolated and made to sit alone for any reason. So those were my thoughts in looking at that.
Thanks, Kitty. I also, there's a comment, Tracy Hall, thank you. She says, reminds me, and she's going back to Malkia's comment about, reminds me of Dan Siegel talking about feeling felt as the significant ingredient in attachment. And thanks for reminding us of that, Tracy. Appreciate that. Sarah?
Oh, I was reflecting back to that teacher in the preschool classroom and the cupcake issue. And when she said, you know, we just seat the children as they come in, we don't pay attention to if it's a white child or a black child or a boy or a girl. And I was like, oh my goodness, then, then you're not seeing them. You haven't seen who's in front of you. If you can't tell me that you recognize that all the girls are clustered and all the boys are here and the black child is alone, or whatever the dynamic is, if you're not watching out for those kind of dynamics, you're actually either ignoring things that are vastly important or hiding behind the I didn't realize, you know, easiness to say, oh, it was not my intention, therefore I'm innocent. You know, it was like either way, she needs to open her eyes more to her children.
Right.
And it's why we can't be colorblind. We can't be gender blind. We can't be race blind. We need to know it, because otherwise we make the mistake of allowing the deepest method of segregation, where we have watched it and created it with our own eyes, in our own classrooms, to exist. And we're already trying to undo that segregation from a long time ago. And so if we don't become sensitive to children segregating themselves or teachers segregating other students, we won't fix this.
Yeah, which is definitely a higher level of awareness. I appreciate what Sarah said about the teacher wasn't, you know, I mean, she pretty much admitted she wasn't noticing anyone. So in her mind, yeah, I'm sorry to say, and we hope that never happens in a Montessori program. We hope it doesn't happen to children anywhere. But not only was she not paying attention to who was in front of her, she wasn't paying attention to her own awareness that she did single out a black child. So
I don't think she was really telling the
multi-layered.
truth.
Well,
there.
Stephanie, go for it. Tell us that. Well,
I
go
think that
ahead.
was just her way of getting out of that argument. I don't know that that was really truthful. Just
She's
my
hiding.
observation. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. We want to hear from you. So, yeah, that could very well be. Any other? I don't see any other hands up, but if you do, I just remind you, click on the participants, and you can raise your electronic hand. Oh, got Jonathan. Go ahead, and then I'll go back to.
Yeah, I was just thinking, based on what Kitty was saying, about the segregation of that child, you know, in the snack situation. If you go back to the research that Cindy and Sarah shared with us about very, very young children, even at 2 years old, begin to show a bias toward people of their own color, that we as teachers, educators, have to overcompensate for that and be highly sensitive to if that's starting to, you know, if children are homogenizing in the classroom. And so we've got to balance that off. That's our job as teachers. And obviously this teacher wasn't quite in tune with that one.
Yeah.
And Sarah, if you can start to call up the PowerPoint, and I'm happy to share this with anyone who wants to use it in their school or elsewhere. But because of that piece that John mentioned, because we know from the doll test that children of color will tend to think that their color is bad, and to think that a person who has white skin is good. And because of our own biases and our own ideologies, we owe it to our schools to have to change this up. And so Sarah, if you're ready, to show schools how to do the work. Let me not say have it, how to do the work to start to create an anti-racist environment within your school. And I like this quote because it says systemic change can only happen when all parts of the system change, which means that it has to change all over the place, all levels, from interior, exterior. And I'm going to put this out, and Sarah, you can go to the next slide, but I'm going to put this out that it's really, really important that as Montessorians, we don't stop this work of anti-racism until our teaching body is diverse, until our associations are diverse, and until our children, our student body, is diverse. Because it's been too long that there have been too many Montessori teachers who are white with assistants who are of color or not at all, and too few teachers of color who haven't even learned about Montessori, can't afford to learn about Montessori, or don't think that they're equipped to be able to be Montessori teachers or leaders of schools. And there are too many children of color who don't have the opportunity to be in Montessori schools. And one of the things that they said in the panel discussion was that children of color were used as the beginning models around educational needs. They were the research, most of the research variables in Head Start programs, in high scope programs, in programs that had to do with children and determining whether or not children of color could benefit from a preschool setting. They were used as the tool to do the research, but from that, we didn't end up with a diversification of educational experiences for them, which is unfortunate. And within Montessori, we have the ability to be able to start to figure out how we can do that, how we can make a way to have more children of color in Montessori schools. And we can also ask ourselves, why is it that there are not more Montessori teachers of color? What is the hang up around that? What can we do about that? Because that's a part of this entire thing that we were just looking at, where children need to see teachers like them, and teachers need to have children who are not like them, and children need to have teachers who are not like them. It's all the way around that we need to be able to diversify Montessori education as a model for the world. So this first area that I mentioned about schools and about your workplace environment is that your staff should be engaged in collective education, meaning it's not that you should have this book that you're reading and you tell them about it, that you're reading a book, but what would it be like if all of your staff were reading the same book at the same time, and that you encourage them to do that, and that during staff meeting, you just talked about how are you doing with that? Or did you catch a point about that? Or that staff came into where they eat or where they clock in or out, and that someone just had a note that said, did you catch in chapter 1 that point about blank? So that you encourage each other to continue to be on the same path together in your understanding and your racial consciousness. There is a book that I mentioned called The Accident of Color, which I really like because it just tells you, it talks about when race wasn't an issue and how it became an issue. And The New Jim Crow, which I know a few people have been reading already. But there are things that should be common understandings among your staff in their road toward racial consciousness. And that means that you have to bring everybody along together. Everybody should know how race became a racial construct, a social construct. And most people don't know that. But it's a piece that your staff should understand, because if they get that race was not an issue before and that somebody just created it out of the blue through some poorly done research, they would have a better understanding about how they need to break up that whole concept of race within the classroom, because to buy into it is to buy into something that is wrong. It's no different than believing that the earth is flat. And so we need to be on the same page about that. We need to be on the same page about our own ideologies and biases so that we can call each other and call ourselves on it. Sarah and I do that all the time and say, oh gosh, what did I just say? Or what was that? Let me reel that back in because we catch it. There are things that still now, I mean, we're still on this journey, and we can do it with a lot of grace and allow ourselves to mess up and say, wow, it's like, that was just a moment that we just realized that. and that everyone understands what racial consciousness is, and that we're all working to get there, and that we keep this as something that is not a workshop and you're done, but that it's a trajectory. It is something that we are working on for quite some time, because look at how much we have to. And so this is just a part of our regular education as Montessorians and educators now, and just needs to be like that. It's a lifelong project. Sarah, go ahead. And so I think that one really important piece for schools and for school leaders to do is to ask yourself, if this is something that you're going to be working toward, then where does it show up? Does it exist in your mission statement, or in your vision statement, or in the core values of your school, of your association, of who you are, of your classroom? Does your school operate, does your classroom operate with that kind of intentionality? And if not, live into it by having that as a living document that is a part of who you are and your identification, so that it calls you every day, and that you remind yourself of that every day. And if it does, then your school is one that is going to continue to look toward diversity, in your staff, to look toward diversity in your students, to look for ways that you can change things up in your classroom, in your school. I gave a challenge last week and said I wanted to see if there are schools out there that would be willing to switch up their environment, so that for 1 year, all reading material, all language material, anything that showed people represented people of color, and to see what that would look like. And is Tanya on?
Yes.
Tanya, can you talk about it?
Yeah, I can. So this summer, a few of my teachers got ahead of me and started reading How to Be an Anti-Racist. And when I started to debrief them on what we are doing in these meetings, and some of the faculty got really excited, and we were cleaning and looking at our library, and they were overwhelmed with the number of books and language materials that they found that were people of color and people of different races. And they started to say, we could do that challenge. Albeit it's a lot more difficult than we thought, but they're excited and they're willing to try. And we're willing to work with Cindy to figure out what it will mean for the children. What's the research objective? What's the thesis? And we're all willing to try. And then one faculty member just sent me 3 pictures of what she did this summer, and it's going to bring me to tears, because she lined 2 sides of her pool and a table with every book she could find to be an anti-racist. And anti-racism and white privilege. And she wore a t-shirt today that said, we can all be anti-racists, we just have to do the work. And she's going to be part of a team of 4. We're going to start with 4 who've done the reading, and then we're going to fold in everyone into it as it comes, because other things have overwhelmed people in different places. And so I'm trying to respect their emotional well-being. But we're on board, Cindy, and it happened organically because you said it to me and I said it to them.
Wow, wonderful, wonderful. And we're gonna follow them to see if there is a change. And so if anyone else wants to take on that challenge, please let us know. Sarah, go ahead.
I just want to say, and 50%, getting 50% of the way there is 50% further than we've ever gotten before.
That's right. That's right. So This is an example of the core values of the National Education Association's equity committee. They have come up with these, that education should be equal to all children, and that it opens a door of opportunity for people, that it is something that is vital to the dignity of a diverse society, that it should teach skills of democracy, that they recognize that there is judgment as human beings, and that they need to strive toward the highest standards of professionalism when it comes to compensation and status and respect of others, that they believe in partnership and collective action. And so I would say create core values for your school and for your classroom, or ensure that the children know the core values of the school and make those the core values that the classroom is striving to achieve, that have to do with diversity and anti-racism. Sarah, go ahead. And become aware of all of the small ways that it is possible to have things that have racist tendencies to slip in. And this is a diagram, I forget what the book is, but it talks about many different ways that that can be considered supremacist, white supremacist, but are also things that can connect with definite racism, being afraid of people of color, denying white privilege, denying racism, tokenism, blame, things like that, that we want to be aware of them so that we call them out in ourselves and others when they start to seep into conversations in schools. And they can. Hiring practices in schools, they can, where you say, well, you know, I don't know, that I'm not sure that that person can really teach a class. It's like, why are you wondering that about the person of color? Or the person who calls up about the position and they don't get called because they sound different. And that difference for you connects with what is traditional standard English language. I have surprised many a person when they have talked to me on the phone and then seen me in person because they expected that my skin was a different color. Paying attention equally to your staff at staff meetings and being careful that you are not lending an ear more to the people who fit a particular model in your head rather than others. That we don't expect more of the child of color, or we don't expect more of the teacher of color, or that we don't expect less of the child of color, and we don't expect less of the teacher of color. That we need to pay attention to those kinds of things and call that out for ourselves. Go ahead, Sarah. And that we learn how to do it. We learn how to communicate with each other. That we can reach a point as a staff and as a school where we can go, ooh, what was that? And that we can learn from it. We can hear it, we can take it in, and we can learn from it. That you ask yourself whether or not your school has a safe place for people to share things when they feel that there has been some kind of discriminatory practice or some kind of covert racism or gender or ethnic discrimination that has happened to them. If anybody has been listening to the whole thing about Ellen DeGeneres, it's like what I have heard in that, and I haven't followed the story because I just don't have the energy to follow individual people's stories, but what I what I have gotten from that is that there must not have been a place to go to, because that's what happens when people don't feel like there is a place, is that it starts to popcorn. One person says something and then they find out, and then another person says something. But your school needs to have a place for people to go. And it's one thing to say, but I'm open and they can always come to me, or they can always speak out at a staff meeting. If they don't, that means they don't feel comfortable to come to you, and that they don't feel comfortable to say it at a staff meeting. But there should be some way to do that. So if someone feels that they are not being treated fairly, or that there is some kind of bias that is present in the school, there's a way for them to be able to speak it. And there's a protocol to be able to do something with it. And the third one I liked, because I thought it would just be an interesting kind of thing, where when there are things that people discover at school that are probably things that are inappropriate to say, create a list. Sarah does that at our school. She has this list going of things that you shouldn't say and what you should say instead. And it's as we start to find out, we hear something and someone's walking by and you kind of hear something and it catches your ear and it's like, well, that's something for the list. And so come up with that, not as a way of dinging people, but as a way of saying, this is something that we've gotten used to saying. Here's something else that we can say instead. And then to help your staff to understand how privilege takes shape within a school, because sometimes we don't recognize that there are children who live in privilege in our schools, and there are some children who don't have that privilege. And if we don't understand that and we don't recognize that, then we won't be working to make that equitable within our school systems. If we make that assumption about ourselves, we won't recognize things that affect our staff members, because we may have staff members who can't always go out for lunch when other people are saying they're going out for lunch. Or who don't have the same, they can't answer the questions the same way. I can't answer the questions when people talk to me about their family photos of their great-great-grandmother. I have nothing like that. My family has no pictures of family from before. I don't have that. Or what their great-great-grandfather was the leader of. It's like, or the mansions that their families had from years ago, and then they sold them and now they have a boat. It's like, it's not my lived experience. And it's not that people can't share their lived experience, but share it holding the fact that it may be different for other people, that they may not have come with that privilege. And it can end up isolating a staff member if they feel like they have to be the person who is just quiet when everyone else in the room is speaking from one particular lens. And I don't know, Sarah, if you can put that in the chat, that YouTube, but if so, it's an interesting one to see that has to do with.
I'll have to do it later after this is over. I'll
Sure.
go back.
Okay.
Okay, so next slide.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And that we look for the little things. We look for hiring practices, and I challenge you to do that until you have a more diverse staff. That we look at microaggressions, that we look at coded language, we look at the language that says, well, their community, it's funny how there are things that we can say that we don't even realize that we've said something that triggers another stereotype. The expression "making America great again," when was it not great? What did it look like when it was great? Considering how things were a long time ago, that's a little worrisome. That expression, just to throw it out, is a little worrisome. Tokenism, making the decision that if we pull on one Black person, we've fixed racism in our school. Or we have one Black child in the classroom, so we're good, we did it. Or we took a class, so we're fine. that we recognize that we're not fine until we're all fine. We're not fine until all situations look well and feel well. That we pay attention to lack of diversity and that it means something to us. And that we pay attention to the voices that are not being spoken. I was called up by someone who is a mentor of mine when I said, it's really important that children are given voice, that teachers give children voice so that they can bring up their feelings in the classroom and their feelings about being marginalized. And he said, you don't give a child voice. They had voice. People remove their voice. And we do that to children, and we do that to people of color, and we do that to people who are very elderly, and we do that to people of certain genders. We do that to people of certain orientations. We just tend to make people invisible, and we need to give them voice, and we need to give them presence. And we have to pay attention for that and of that in our workplace. Go ahead, Sarah. And this is what you should see in an organization that is striving for those kinds of things. Committed leadership to make that happen. A holistic approach where you're looking at all of your practices, everything that you do with the same lens. When you have recognized also contributions of people of color that you've looked at, trying to shift that weight of all white attention when it comes to contributions and things that have happened in the organization, things that have happened in our country and in our school and in our land. Your school should know who created this land, who was here before us. And your school should open every year recognizing that it wasn't you. There were Indigenous people before you who were there and who were a part of that land. And the school should recognize that. Having practices that reach out to recruit staff of color. If you don't have them, it's not like just wait for them to come. It's find out where they are, because especially in the Montessori Association, Montessori education, people of color often don't know about Montessori, and they definitely don't know how to get in. And so we have to find out, where are they, and how can we get more information about Montessori education into the local level, into the JCs, where we can reach people and get information out to provide scholarships, partial scholarships, or to provide information to bring them in. And the same thing when it comes to recruiting students. Where are they? Where are they? Let's give them access to information. And that we create inclusive programs, that they're designed, the things that we design are designed so that we have outreach. We go through a little bit of extra work at our school to put some things in other languages so that we make sure that we have it. And it's not such a simple thing to do, but we try to do that. But to also just think of how inclusive can we be, to recognize that there are other kinds of rituals that that different races and ethnicities have, to understand it, to understand when children are out of school because of that, to understand when a young child who's in middle school and speaks about her menstruation because it's a part of her culture, that is her growing up, and that is not supposed to be considered a bad thing that you whisper and that you don't talk about because Americans don't do that, or because traditionally Americans have not done that. Well, Americans are, because Americans come in all shapes and races and ethnicities and colors, and we need to step up and to understand. And that we open up the communication more. That if we have parents of color, that we open up communication to ask them, how are we? How's our report card? and that we're willing to listen. Sarah, go ahead. So those are two resources that have to do with the organizational level, but that heads of schools could certainly use for their schools. I really love them as tools. And I don't know if we can share that somehow. And Sarah, go to the next one. And these are really great articles. If you're stuck for books, or you say my staff is just not going to read a book, switch over. Switch over to doing some articles periodically. And these are a few that, that I happen to find very interesting and thought-provoking and worthy of conversation. And Sarah, the next one. Oh, that was it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So any thoughts that have come up for you about what you can do, how you can do something, or something that you have done?
Well, Cindy, I'll tell you, it's been an active chat, so I'll say that. And I'll watch for some hands to go up. In the meantime, I want to go back to Claudia Mann and Malkia, who did have a comment earlier. Is your comment something you'd still like to share?
And then if we can get Andrew in there.
Oh, and then Andrew, sure.
I'll defer to Andrew because I've been chatting up. I've been one of those people. I've been guilty.
I know you've been, no, not guilty, active. It's called active.
Very active. But, you know, I have so many thoughts, as you can tell. But I do think it's deeper than an academic approach. While academic approach is great, right? It's great for the mind. It is a part of it. But this, you know, as Andrew always likes to quote every year, is about transcendence, right? Which starts from the inner resource. And so the privilege of having COVID is what I want to say, is that everyone gets to go inside because they have to stay inside anyway. And if they take the opportunity to actually go inside, right, to who they really are and examine the thinking, and protect the body, but we haven't been great about protecting our mind. Right? We haven't been great about protecting our spirit. Obviously, there are many reasons why. We live in a culture of fear, and that capitalizes from fear, right? But that has created way before the virus, we've been sick and it's coming out. We're just showing our levels of sickness for those who oppress and those who have been oppressed, right? Like the level of sickness is, you know, like I was saying earlier about whether I feel you, do you feel me feeling you, is almost like saying, you know, someone has the right to give you the license to live, to be present, to be a presence, even though you are alive and you're waiting for it, which is crazy. Or someone thinking, you don't exist until I say so, as if they are a creator. They have created that person, that being, that group, and etc. So what I love to do in my classroom, obviously I do concentrate on meditation a lot for this reason, because diversity is, for me, I think that we're neurodiverse, spiritually diverse, and cultivating the oneness in that speaks to the biodiversity we have and that we see and live in. Okay, I think I'm done.
Thank you, Malkia. Appreciate your voice in this and appreciate you being here today. I'm going to go to Andrew, Andrew Cutt next. If you can unmute Andrew, and then I'll go to Melissa Mappy.
I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me okay?
You are, yeah, good.
Yeah. Well, as usual, because Malkia is at our school, she's a tough act to follow because she's so profound and always makes me think. So thank you, Malkia. I just wanted to say a few thoughts. First off, this past year has been a personal journey for me as a founder and head of school, because at some level, I feel like maybe I was feeling like the school was doing enough, like we're doing enough things to reach our mission and vision when it came to diversity, inclusion, and race and such. But this past year has just taught me that what we've been doing is not nearly enough. And these sessions that I've been able to go to with the town halls, which I haven't been able to go to all of them, has been a part of that journey for me. So it's been a personal reawakening and a personal recommitment to what means so much to me personally as a human being and as an educator. And in that process, what we've done at the high school is that we've made a conscious intention to include racial literacy and social justice in our new high school leadership curriculum. And Cindy and Sarah have been very gracious and super helpful with their efforts and their time to contribute to that. And so what we've done is created competencies and skill sets and tools for our high school students to learn. And those things will also be connected to other aspects of our program, because to Malkia's point, you can't just teach these things intellectually or academically. They have to be embodied by the staff and the school. And so we are looking at, connecting that part of the curriculum with our ethics curriculum and with our emotional intelligence aspect to the curriculum and to our civics curriculum and so on. And so, and eventually, sooner than later, we hope this high school curriculum will be adapted throughout the school down to the lower levels. And Jonathan has been a part of shaping our leadership program at the high school, but he's been a big advocate for nudging me to not wait to really develop these things at the lower levels as well. But to my broader point, which is that you can't teach these things without taking the bigger steps, we are now planning our first Race, Equity, Inclusion, Diversity Council meeting on August 26th, which will be our first step to do what you guys have been doing here at the town halls. And I'm really happy that Cindy has offered to attend that because it's our first step toward this conversation. And as a first step, people will come to that with all kinds of different perspectives and needs and expectations. And so much like the process you've been doing here, I hope to begin with a session on self-reflection and our own implicit biases and mindsets, then to move toward shared stories of our collective experiences of race, and then to look, to examine. I like the word interrogate, actually, that was used in one of the videos, to interrogate what we're doing as a school across the board, to see what we can, where we want to transcend. And then, of course, to look at how we can utilize what we're learning at our school to impact, the society as a whole and look at systemic racism. So I'm really humbled by this work. I'm also really determined about it with hearing the things that have been shared over these past few months and experiencing what we have as a country, and with the passing of, first Elijah Cummings, Maryland congressman, whom we were fortunate enough to have to our school, and then recently with John Lewis, whom I'm so sad that we weren't able to get to come to the school, but in their spirit, we need to, to make good trouble and to continue moving forward in hope and not in despair. And so those are my thoughts, and I hope I haven't gone on too long, but thank you for letting me share.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
We'll go to Melissa Maltby.
Yeah, thank you. Hi,
Melissa.
everybody. You got the oneness trifecta going here. I teach the primary age group and at Oneness Family School, and we are having the opportunity of opening like a new classroom. And so I love the fact that you set the challenge to, what are the books that we're reading? Who are they by? What are the contributions that people have made? And I realize I have fallen way short on that part. I've really enjoyed these webinars. You have no idea. It's like Andrew said, it's a lot of self-reflection and a lot of like, no, I am part of the problem because I'm not doing more to make it right. And so I started putting a book list together for this new classroom. And I found that a lot of the books, as I was sort of going in our curriculum in order, a lot of the books were written by white people, and it was bothering me. And so I was like, well, where are all of the African-American astrophysicists? Well, Melissa, it turns out that they're right up the road from me in Baltimore. So, and they're also at Goddard Jet Propulsion, I think, yeah. We have NASA here too, and so a good number of prominent scientists of different colors work at NASA.
Melissa, has your mic gotten covered?
Huh?
Your microphone has been covered.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
So then I started gathering materials together of the Black astronauts and the Black scientists that put the different types of cameras that the astronauts took into space for the Apollo missions. Those were created by an incredible guy from Georgetown University, and he's still, you know, alive and here and available. So so then, you know, all of the gears start working, right? The books start to flow, you find them more, then you can find the people. Now we have to figure out a way to bring the people so that the kids, in at least in our school, understand that it is a world of color and we're all a part of it. And we all come from many different backgrounds, and we don't look like the background that we come from. But so anyway, I hope that was helpful. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank
you,
you.
Melissa. I don't see any other hands up right now. So Cindy, back to you.
Sure. So I wonder how many people feel like they can make a change in their school. And if you were to just imagine, what would be one thing that you could do differently this year?
I can go first, Cindy. I know I already talked a lot.
Sure.
But I'll just say, I think one of your slides said it well, which is I have to be a better leader in this regard. I have to be a more clear leader, and I have to stake out the pathway we have to go. And I think that, you know, in addition to the other things I mentioned, I feel like that's step number one for me, and to make sure my voice is heard in that regard.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andrew. Someone else.
I am Julie, and I agree with I need to be a more clear leader. Everyone knows that I've been working with the diversity in our school and trying to address, you know, being equitable. However, I haven't come out and said, this is what I believe we need to look at. What do you think? That sort of thing. And I haven't been real clear about it. And I need to make I would say, demonstrative stand.
Thank you,
with
Julie.
the rest of the staff.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Julie. And Malkia does have her hand up, so go ahead, Malkia.
Oh, I was just thinking for me.
Malkia, did I say it wrong again? I'm trying to like.
Okay. You'll get it. You'll get it.
Help me, please say it.
Like everything else.
Malkia.
It's Malkia.
Malkia.
I accident, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for acknowledging that. What I was thinking about doing, you know, a lot of the work and the things that I do, I kind of do that with my students all the time, right? And what I haven't been always responsible for, you know, I might send an email or I might share at opportune times. I don't always share it inside the community because I'm so I feel a little bit like I should honor people where they're at, because everyone's at different levels. So I'm not going to say anything. And that, I think I haven't taken responsibility for that, right? So in acknowledging presence, I haven't acknowledged my presence in the community the way that I know I can. I know, like, not necessarily but more just honoring my presence within the community by sharing, even, especially when it's uncomfortable. You know, I practice when it's nice, right? Like, oh, when it's nice, I'll share. But if you're not being nice, I'm not saying much. And I know that has a lot to do with my enculturation. My family, you know, my mom is from Ethiopia. So I was growing, you know, even though I was born here, I grew up as an Ethiopian woman, which we don't really voice what we have to say that much. And if you do, it's only for a selective few, you know. I have to overcome that, another area of transcendence. And so I'm comfortable in sharing, especially with my students and my parents, like that's my world, right? Like I do that and I can't even help it. And so, and I empower all my students to do that too. Like that's what's going to happen to Upper L. That's your agenda, right? And of like that, but I haven't necessarily been that force outside of my classroom. And I think that's been a disservice and something that I will work on.
Thank you. We have Lisa Tate and then Michael Crump.
Hi. I have been working on this for a while in my classroom, and I have a really wonderful book selection, but I have also been working on just reading some different material and books and trying to understand the racism within me. And so this year I wanted to go a little deeper, and this summer I picked up the White Fragility book and found out there's actually a reading guide that comes with a bunch of questions. And I have spent the entire summer just really pondering and writing. I've written volumes on all of the different questions that have been asked, and I've really tried to go as deep and be as honest with myself as I could. So I'm really, I'm feeling the benefit of that, and feeling like I can be stronger about speaking out when I see things that aren't right, and things that are racist, even if even if most people don't see it. So, I mean, I don't feel like I'm speaking well. I'm not a public speaker, but anyway, I just wanted to tell you about the reading guide, because that has made a huge difference in my personal work. Just really, you know, getting down to, you know, what is in my heart and what is in my head and what is in my generational tool bag that may be stopping me or maybe hindering me or maybe blocking a visual that I can't see. So I've been working with that.
Yeah, you're muted, Cindy.
Wonderful. That's a deep work when you're really taking something apart and then writing it out so as to reflect on it. And that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. We have Michael next, and then back to Claudia Mann after that. Michael, if you could unmute.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. So I was just, you know, reflecting on what Andrew Cutt was saying, that the transformation usually is not an academic one. It can't be taught through, you know, just reading and awareness, although those things are part of the process. But he said it's an embodiment. And that's huge. That's a profound statement. We're talking about changing the way somebody feels about something inside, so that the former is no longer there and there's a new feeling. So here at the school here at Montessori Village Academy, you know, we've started our year with some initiatives. With the literature that we're jumping into, is part of the process that we've been discussing here. And it's been interesting to see, because we are a multicultural school, we have mixed races. It's been interesting to see, even at such a young age, the differences in responses. But what I'm trying to say, though, really is that what we're doing here is instead of bringing forward the examples of colored persona that were, and I don't want to say that, I want to say this delicately, instead of bringing forward and making prominent the colored people who are prominent in academia, and the doctors and professors, and the people of color who contribute to our society are fantastic, and those are great examples. But where people get stopped in their track is the fear of the things that they're not sure about. The nappy hair and the vernacular. These are not bad things or wrong things. It's just a part of different culture. I said nappy hair and vernacular pertaining to Black people, but I'm sure with Hispanics and other races, there are different things. Accepting that's what we're trying to do, accepting those things as well. Because for all our good intentions, and trying to get our children to understand that there are Black scientists and Hispanic astrophysicists, there's always going to be the regular guy. And we're not all going to be scientists, and we're not all going to be, we're going to have nappy hair, and we're going to be really, really Black, and or yellow tinge, and we're going to, that's the level of acceptance that I'm thinking on those planes is where that embodiment needs to meet the average person, because with all our good intentions, those are the ones those are the situations that stop us in our track. John Lewis, fantastic. President Barack Obama, fantastic. But in a sense, we normalize, it's a part of white normalcy when we look for examples in our history of people who are accomplished in ways that we think, you follow what I'm saying. It's the regular everyday guy that we're trying to get folks to accept. And we're working on that here with some of the literature and the way we are dealing with the children and interacting with them, and how we are encouraging them to interact with one another. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And I want to say that we don't know all of the people. There are so many people who don't know who John Lewis was, but we don't know. I mean, that's a part of it. And I think there were so many slaves who did the initial inventions in America. They were everyday people, but they did great things. And I don't know that there's so many just every day. I have met young men in Harlem that can play music like you wouldn't believe. And nobody knows who they are, but they're somebody. And so I do get drilling down to what is some of the core of difference that people end up discriminating against, and that there are so many songs that came out of slavery over nappy hair and things like that. But I think that it's not an and but, it's an and. It's like we need to know about people who have done things and things that we may not even know. And we need to drill down to all of the little pieces of our own mental models of what we consider to be acceptable and what we don't consider to be acceptable. Sarah has been searching for hair books, specifically because I said we got to get to the hair. And so we've been trying to look for hair books, and it drives me crazy when I see dolls of African descent and the hair looks like they just took the wig off of a white doll and put it onto a Black doll so that they would be acceptable, and made the nose so that it would be acceptable. And we need to honor the diversity and the difference, and that I so get. Yes, we need to drill down to that.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say about the hair issue. So it's not so much that I've been looking for hair books, because there's a lot of great books on beautiful hair. I've got this kind of hair and that. It's about the representation in the everyday book. You know, what sort of talking about. It's
That
what's
too. Lisa, what is that one though?
I love my hair.
Yeah, so I Love My Hair is a great book. It's a lovely book, but it's all about the hair. I'm trying to find and really uncover the fact that, when Cindy pointed it out to me, the fact that the representation in the storybooks that aren't about being Black or something are often still hair is simplified into a white version, as opposed to letting it be side puff pom-poms or in divided sections or wild. I mean, there was one book that I just got where the cover has got this girl with, you know, it's just her hair. You know, it's not about her hair. It's just that. Anyway, that's the fun of finding those books is really cool.
Sarah, thanks. And Gail Hall says, Layla's Happiness, you can add that to your list if you don't already have it, has a character with beautiful black hair. It's not about hair, but about happiness.
Yeah.
So another one to add. Great. And I know, let's see, Claudia's been waiting. So I'm going to ask Claudia if you can unmute next.
I just realized I had my video off too. Sorry, I wasn't looking at the screen. Before, when I was going to make a comment about the children that in the cupcake thing, there were two thoughts that came to mind, and one was that I do have concerns about how Montessorians handle a lot of things, but I guess the biggest one is that idea of what a teacher expects the whole class to look like in terms of normalization. And I think the conversation had twisted a little bit to maybe there was a discipline thing, maybe there was something that happened that we didn't know. But what I found is that teachers seem to have this picture in their mind, and I think the way that, and then when it doesn't meet that picture, they try to force it, and there's discipline things and ways that teachers handle those issues. And I think that surely there are racial issues among those issues with what does normalized need to look like, and when a child doesn't fit into what the trained Montessori teacher is looking for the class to look like when a child looks normalized. So I think there's a piece of that as Montessorians, we all need to think about. And part of the reason that seems to be so strong in my mind was that I got involved in the conversation online that started in February when there was a racial incident at the AMI refresher course. And I was uncomfortable with some of the comments that were being made that I felt were insensitive to the experience of the Black people that had been mistreated by the hotel folks. And I was bringing up ways that we might talk about it. And I got called out in a way because I had suggested nonviolent communication strategies. And the person of color who reached out to me privately said that Montessori often makes that person felt like that Montessorians will hide behind grace and courtesy rules or nonviolent communication, so that if someone is making good trouble, as John Lewis might say, they then put it down as like, well, they're angry or they're this or they're that, and that's not good grace and courtesy. So I guess that's what I wanted to say about the whole preschool piece of it in Montessori, that I feel like maybe as Montessorians, we really kind of need to look at how Montessori may be actually encouraging us to stay stuck in some level of racist perspective. And then the other thing I wanted to share about was, I think you'd asked, like, what are we going to do personally this year? I'm not in the classroom or at a school any longer, but I do have a group that I've started on cosmic education, which seems to be my my big soapbox these days. And so in my cosmic education Facebook group that I have, I put out something. I had watched the author of White Fragility give a talk, and I put out something about that on our group. And we started a discussion group, and we're using, instead of reading the book together, we decided to use some of her discussion topics. So if you need any support for having discussions, she has some that they're very open to everybody sharing and helping each person in the group be seen. And we've had some wonderful discussions in that group. But the other thing that I did was I joined a group with Black women primarily, and we've been discussing the racial perspective from looking at social constructs. And we started with watching the video or this documentary series, When They See Us. And so being one of a minority of a white person and an older white person in the group with mostly younger women and mostly women of color, it was so interesting for me to just be an observer and listen to how that whole experience impacted each one of us in such a different way. That just clear, it was just such a horrifying thing that happened to those boys. And so part of what I'm doing is trying to help myself be in situations where I'm listening to people that I don't normally get to be with. And it's been really a beautiful experience to be accepted by this group of women. And so I just, I never had really made a decision to join a group of people that weren't like me. And so I had to be courageous enough to do that, because I was a little bit nervous about how that would be. And it's turned out to be an absolutely fabulous experience for learning. So that's what I'm doing.
Wow.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for all of that, Claudia. Thank you for
Thank you
sharing.
for all of that. And what happened at the AMI refresher has been the unspoken elephant in the room. And thank you for having the courage to bring that up and out, and all of the things that you said. Really, thank you for the expression.
Thank you, Cindy. We have just a moment left. I want to give Andrew a moment, and then I'll turn it over to you to close this up.
Okay.
I just wanted to share a thought and an invitation that as we walk this journey together, and we walk it along with other people that might be joining us, that will be joining us, that we hold each other and support each other with humility and with grace and with love. And the reason I bring it up is that when I first started rethinking what I could do personally and what I could do with my school, I shared some of those thoughts on social media. And some people were very quick to cast aspersions on what I was sharing or wanting to do, or to judge, my efforts in certain ways. And so I just want to invite us to be open-minded and to understand that we're all coming from different backgrounds and different experiences and different places as we enter this work. And so that we welcome everyone from wherever they're coming from, at whatever place they're at, because the work is big enough that we need everyone. And if we do have something to say to someone, to provide advice or feedback, I would suggest that we don't do that in a public forum where many other people might see that, and where that person might feel really not encouraged to continue on. So we're all in this together, and I invite us to really hold each other and support each other in the work.
Thank you, Andrew. Sarah, let's end with the video piece we were going to show.
Carly Dias. I'm 11 years old. A lot of grown-ups think that opportunities exist for all kids, and all we need to do is apply ourselves. But I know that's just not true. It shouldn't matter if you live in the city or suburbs, on a farm or a reservation, or what your zip code may be, but it does. There's still rules to keep our schools separate and unequal. Why? We spend a lot of time talking about whether what someone says or does is racist, but that's not enough. You not liking me for the color of my skin is not the only thing that can affect my chances for success. I'm talking about the built-in barriers that keep me and other kids from reaching our full potential. It's all around us. We might not recognize it, even when it's right under our noses. Like, remember that time I had to start a campaign just to get books in my library about kids who look like me? Do you care enough to look closer, to talk to each other, to your students, to your communities? We've got to change the dialogue. Because when we do, you'll be amazed by all we can accomplish. I'm looking at you.
Thank you, Sarah. I love how children can tell you things. So we're going to continue school. That will be next week, as we were going to do 2 weeks on it. Andrew, thank you so much for reminding us about holding each other with grace. But thank you, everybody, for the comments that you had today. Please walk away thinking about what you can do differently in your school, or what additional thing you can do in your school. And let's bring that back next week, and let's look at some policies and how some policies could be different in schools and what that would look like. That's what we're going to talk about next week. And we're going to talk about why is it that Montessori classrooms are not as diverse, and why is it that Montessori teachers are not diverse, and why is it that in some places there are only white Montessori teachers with Black assistants and not the other way around. So give that some thought, and we'll see you next week. And John is going to show the rest of his piece that has to do with leadership in this regard. So it should be a very full school racism reflection.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Andrew, for coming and sharing, and Jonathan. Appreciate all the participants coming today, and we will see you next week.
Thank you.